Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about 5 players who will win you your fantasy league in 2024 fantasy football. We are going to go in depth through each and every single one of these 5 players, and I will be explaining to you guys why I believe they have the upside to take home your fantasy football championship, win you that coveted fantasy football belt. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into 5 players that will help you win your fantasy league in 2024 fantasy football. We begin with the first player who will win you your fantasy football league in 2024, and that is Puka Nacua, wide receiver of the Los Angeles Rams. Current aggregate ADP from ESPN Sleeper, MFL Fantrax, and NFFC have him as the wide receiver number 7 at pick 10. Underdog Fantasy ADP wide receiver 7 at pick 10.5. Now, Puka Nacua last season for your fantasy football team, if you had him, was the best waiver wire pickup you made, maybe even the best waiver wire pickup of all time that you have ever made, or he was one of the best, if not the best, late round, last pick type of fantasy football selection that you have ever made. Because this dude didn't start off just kind of having a solid game, right? He didn't go 4 for 4 for 75 yards and a touchdown in his first ever start. Nah, this dude went balls to the wall. Week 1 up against the Seattle Seahawks. 10 receptions on 15 targets for 119 yards. And we, as a fantasy community, said, you know what? You got to not just walk, you got to run to the waiver wire after week 1. Go ahead and pick him up. And then you get to week 2 up against the 49ers, a fierce defense. And it's like, okay, I think I'd probably play him, but there's definitely some large risk in playing Puka Nacua, who in his first ever game blew the defense's back out. Is he going to be able to do it again against the 49ers? Probably not. There's definitely some risk. And then the motherfucker tops that. He says, you know what? Those 21.9 PPR points I scored in week number 1, hold that. 15 receptions on 20 targets for 147 yards, 30.1 PPR points. So he comes out the gate on fire in week 1, then looks even better in week 2, and his whole season can be described as nothing other than downright amazing. He was the wide receiver 4 in PPR in his rookie year, the wide receiver 6 in PPR points per game. He played in all 17 games, having 159 targets, 9.4 per game, ranking 7th, 105 receptions, 6.2 per game, 8th, 1,486 receiving yards, 87.4 per game, ranking 4th, and 6 total touchdowns, 27th. In terms of efficiency, he ranked 6th in yards per route run, 9th in yards per team pass attempt, 26th in dominator rating, and 33rd in target accuracy. Now, I have seen a lot of people that are scared to pull the trigger in round number 1 on Puka Nacua. And it's not because people believe that Puka Nacua is not an incredible talent. It's because people are worried that with Cooper Kupp back fully healthy, right? Because Cooper Kupp entered into last season banged up, and a lot of people like Cooper Kupp where he is going based upon ADP, and I like Cooper Kupp a ton as well. But at the end of the day, even though Cooper Kupp will be fully healthy entering into the season, knock on wood, hopefully nothing happens before the season starts, but even if Cooper Kupp is fully healthy, which I fully believe he will be, I still believe that Puka Nacua is the clear number 1 target on this team. Even when Cooper Kupp was more healthy towards the end of last season, it didn't matter because Puka Nacua was still that guy. In the NFL playoffs, back against the wall, up against the Detroit Lions in round number 1. Spoiler alert, if you didn't know, they lost that game, but Puka Nacua was a humongous part of the game plan. He had 9 receptions on 10 targets for 181 yards and a touchdown. So while Cooper Kupp should be able to bounce back slightly from a season that was not what we all expected because he came into the year banged up, and we all clearly saw last season that Cooper Kupp is not completely washed. He still has gas left in the tank. And again, I like Cooper Kupp at ADP, but at the end of the first round, I have 100% confidence that Puka Nacua is a good enough player. He is an amazing player that he is going to be able to put up yet another top 8 season with the upside of being a top 3 wide receiver. Last year, he only scored 6 touchdowns. Now, the touchdown number at wide receiver is like a yo-yo, right? It goes up, it goes down. It's very finicky, right? It is hard to predict touchdowns at the wide receiver position unless you're a couple of players, right? Guys like Julio Jones, who were allergic to the end zone, Jacoby Myers in New England, it was easy to predict those motherfuckers aren't going to score a lot of touchdowns. But a guy like Puka Nacua, who we've just seen 1 year so far in the NFL, I think he could get 8, 10 touchdowns, especially if the Rams offense is pretty solid like I project them to be yet again. And if that is the case, Puka could easily be a top 3 league-winning wide receiver this year. And I really find it hard to rub the crystal ball, that's so Raven style, and see the future where Puka Nacua ends up as a bust. Unless, of course, there's an injury. Knock on wood. We don't root for injuries. At number 2, we move to Josh Jacobs, running back, formerly of the Las Vegas Raiders, now of the Green Bay Packers. Aggregate ADP running back 11 at pick 27. Underdog Fantasy ADP running back 12 at pick 52.4. Josh Jacobs coming off of a dominant 50 Shades of Grey style chains and whips season in 2022, where he averaged 19.3 PPR points per game, ends up in 2023 in Las Vegas having his worst season yet in terms of points per game with only 13.9. Prior seasons 19.3, 15.1, 15.4, and 14.7. That was because the Las Vegas Raiders as a whole combusted under Josh McDaniels. I understand that things were a little bit better with Pierce, but once the team started to get a little bit hot, once the team started to get a little bit frisky, Josh Jacobs ended up missing the end of the season with a quad strain. Josh Jacobs finished as the running back 28 in PPR and 18 in PPR points per game. He had 223 carries, 17.9 per game, number 11 at running back. 805 rushing yards, 61.9 per game, 24th. 54 targets, 4.2 per game, 19th. 37 receptions, 2.8 per game, 24th. 296 receiving yards, 22.8 per game, 19th. And 6 total touchdowns, 24th. Now, I understand, based upon where you drafted him last season, you got the short end of the stick, or you got a big stick shoved directly up your ass, kebab style, and it sucked, right? Based upon where you drafted Josh Jacobs, you were certainly disappointed with his output. But when you put into context the season that Jacobs had with his statistics, it makes a lot more sense. Jacobs was the 7th. He ranked 7th highest in Dominator rating, but he faced the most amount of defenders in the box on average. 7.2 defenders in the box. It was incredible that Jacobs even had those decent of numbers, with the fact that the defense knew they were going to hand the ball off to Josh Jacobs. In Green Bay, the defenses are going to need to be on their toes. Because guess who the Green Bay Packers have? They have Jordan Love, right? They don't have Aiden O'Connell or Jimmy fucking porn star Garoppolo, right? They have a legitimate quarterback with other wide receiver weapons, right? I understand that they don't technically on paper have a wide receiver 1. Is it Jaden Riley-Reed? Is it going to be Christian Watson? Is it going to be Romeo Dobbs? Is it going to be Dontavian Wicks, right? I know that's a question for fantasy football, but I do know one thing though, and that is that Josh Jacobs is the lead back on a team that is going to be able to push the games to be high scoring, that is going to be able to put the Packers up late in games, so they are going to be able to do something that's very important for running backs, and that is run the ball. The biggest negative I have seen out of a lot of people that are scared of drafting Josh Jacobs, that are nervous about Josh Jacobs, is that the Packers are not going to run the ball with Josh Jacobs the same way that the Raiders would, right? They're not going to give Josh Jacobs this massive workload, and I get that, and I agree. I agree that I don't think Josh Jacobs is going to get 20 carries a game or 18 carries a game. I don't think so, because I know that they're going to mix in Marshawn Lloyd. I know probably A.J. Dillon, even though that guy is about as useful as a broken condom when you're trying not to get a hooker pregnant. Josh Jacobs is still going to get his licks in the red zone, right? He scored only 6 touchdowns last season. He could score 12 or more. He has scored 12 touchdowns in terms of rushing twice in his 5-year career. I understand that he only scored 6 last year, but that is because the Raiders were in the perfect situation for everything to get messed up for Josh Jacobs, right? In reality, it's not the perfect situation, right? It was a bad news Bears situation, and I think that Josh Jacobs is going to do a lot better in Green Bay. Are there going to be games where A.J. Dillon or Marshawn Lloyd vulture Josh Jacobs, and it's a little bit frustrating? Sure, but I do still believe Josh Jacobs is the best pass-catching running back on this team. I think that Josh Jacobs has sneaky good pass-catching. Not a lot of people talk about his pass-catching prowess. He has caught 50 or more balls in 2 out of 5 seasons. He's not going to get a crazy amount of receiving touchdowns. He hasn't even scored a single receiving touchdown in his career, despite having 197 receptions and over 1,400 receiving yards. I think he's going to end up getting his first this season, but Josh Jacobs, even though they are going to kind of wean back his workload compared to prior seasons in Las Vegas, I think that the touches are going to be worth significantly more in Green Bay than they were ever worth in Viva Las Vegas. At number 3, we got Isiah Pacheco. We're keeping it with the running back. Isiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs, aggregate ADP running back 12 at pick 31. Underdog Fantasy ADP running back 10 at pick 40.5. Isiah Pacheco was a guy that was going pretty late in fantasy football drafts last year. Now, he wasn't one of your last picks like a Puka Nacua or a guy that was largely undrafted like Kyron Williams or Devon Achane, who I was on in a big way last season. Going late like Mostert. Pacheco was going around running back 30. I watched one of my mock drafts from last season. I was like, how did I do in this random mock draft? And I watched myself pick Pacheco, and he was ranked as running back 30 on Fantasy Pros towards the end of August. So based off of that, my assumption is that he was going around that range, and that was a nice fucking home run by me, liking Isiah Pacheco. Now, Pacheco was the running back 15 in PPR and the running back 14 in PPR points per game. But this season, I truly believe that he could do significantly better. Isiah Pacheco was on a Chiefs offense that last year was largely questionable during the season, right? There was a lot of points during the NFL regular season where people were casting off the Chiefs, right? Going into the NFL playoffs, people thought the Chiefs were as good as dead, right? They were thinking the Ravens, the Bills, it's finally their time. The fucking giant is dead. The Chiefs are dead, and guess what? Now it's time for these other teams to run rampant, and we all know what happens. The Kansas City Chiefs lay down a pipe. They drop the hammer down on the 49ers, and they win the Super Bowl in overtime. Isiah Pacheco was on a team, though, during the regular season. Again, while they had this triumphant playoffs, they looked like the good old Chiefs. During the regular season, there were a lot of missteps with the Chiefs. There's a lot of games they probably should have won, but they lost because some of their wide receivers can't catch the ball. There was a lot of times where Patrick Mahomes would drop back, throw a laser, throw a dime like Trace McSorley, and the receiver thought they were playing volleyball. It would bounce off the guy's hand, go up in the air, and it would be caught by the grass or the turf, right? So the Chiefs now look locked and loaded offensively. They bring in Xavier Worthy and they bring in Hollywood Brown. I understand that Hollywood Brown is a guy that might have kind of given you a nice Cleveland steamer over the last couple of years if you drafted him in fantasy football, but he's a very solid wide receiver, especially when his quarterback is Patrick Mahomes. They draft Xavier Worthy, who is as fast as they get. Joey Logano out there, Max Verstappen out there, right? And they still have Travis Kelce, and I have no idea what's going to happen with Rashee Rice, if they're going to throw the book at him, if they're just not going to do anything with him. Who knows at this point? It is late July, and we still don't know. But even without Rashee Rice for the first couple of games, they have Travis Kelce, Xavier Worthy, and Hollywood Brown. It's going to be an offense that is going to be in a lot of situations to score the ball because the guys can actually catch the ball, which is what you ask out of your wide receivers. And while I understand that Kelce's a big red zone threat, so is Isiah Pacheco. 14 games played with 13 starts, missed 30 games with a sprained shoulder towards the end of the season. He had 205 carries, 14.6 per game, ranking 22nd, 935 rushing yards, 66.8 per game, 18th, 49 targets, 3.5 per game, 22nd, 44 receptions, 3.1 per game, 17th, 244 receiving yards, 17.4 per game, 22nd, and 9 total touchdowns, 12th. He ranked second in catch rate, which is very important because we're going to talk about how Isiah Pacheco saw a lot more targets towards the tail end of last season. 11th in breakaway run rate, 15th in dominator rating, and 12th in yards created. So he starts off the season pretty hot, right? 4 receptions on 4 targets for 31 yards. And then it was 1 reception, 2 receptions, 3, 1, 6, 4, 3, 0, 1. But then towards the end of last season, it's like, okay, we want to use Pacheco more. There's no Jerick McKinnon. Let's target him more. So he closed out the season, 5 receptions, 3 receptions, 4 receptions, and then 7 receptions up against the Bengals. And then in the playoffs, he gets 1 reception, then 4, and then 6. So while Pacheco is not Christian McCaffrey out there catching the rock, while he's not prime Austin Eckler catching the rock, he is proficient at it on an offense that we expect to be downright amazing. So I think a lot of people are overthinking Isiah Pacheco with how good the Chiefs offense is. He should easily be able to replicate his 9 total touchdowns from last season and could easily get up to the 12 or 15 number. So I'm a huge fan of Isiah Pacheco as the running back 12. If you jam wide receivers early, Isiah Pacheco is an amazing, amazing 3rd round pick. Moving now to player number 4 that I think is going to help you guys win your league, and that is Kyle Pitts, tight end of the Atlanta Falcons. Aggregate ADP, tight end 6 at pick 55. Underdog Fantasy ADP, tight end 6 at pick 60.3. Now, there are going to be a lot of people that hear the name Kyle Pitts, and it gives them flashbacks, right? It's like that meme of the soldier in war, and he's just staring at the screen like there's a million things happening in his brain. That is what is going to happen when I say Kyle Pitts, right? The gerbil that's running around in your head on the wheel, controlling your brain. The lights are going to shut off. He's going to fall off of the hamster wheel. I know it's not a gerbil. It's not fucking G-Force. Great film. But Kyle Pitts is a guy that a lot of people have gotten burned by, right? They've drafted Kyle Pitts, and he's never really paid off at ADP. His best season was actually his rookie season, where he only scored 1 touchdown, but he had 68 receptions on 110 targets for 1,026 yards and 1 touchdown, averaging 10.4 PPR points per game. And then he averages 7 the next year, and then just 8.1 last year. I really talked myself into Kyle Pitts last year. I really talked myself into the narrative of just how great this guy was at Florida, the Gators, with how great of an athlete this guy looks. Like, just the look of the guy. He looks like he could be the best tight end in the NFL, but it just hasn't worked out. And it's because he has been sabotaged by a dumb fuck head coach in Arthur Smith, and the quarterback play in Atlanta has been as horrific as you could think of it. Kyle Pitts was just being drugged down by the quarterback play, by the coaching. If you've ever watched Game of Thrones, the Battle of the Bastards, when Jon Snow is getting surrounded, he's getting covered by bodies. That is what it really felt like was happening to Kyle Pitts last season. And I'm going to stand here just like Jon Snow in that same episode where he's standing there with the sword and there is a million people coming his way on horseback, right? I am going to defend Kyle Pitts' honor with my life. This guy coming out of college deserved the Suka Lamink. He deserved the Gawk Gawk 9000 special. He deserved the Blumpkin, which is just a disgusting thing. I don't think anyone actually does that. I don't know why anyone would actually do that, but if you know what a Blumpkin is, everyone was giving him the Gawk Gawk 9000 special, and I think he deserved it. And I understand that after 3 years, you might say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, can't get fooled again. Fool me 3 times. Fuck Nick, I don't know if I could do it again, but I'm ready to be fooled for the 4th time, but I don't think I'm going to get fooled this time. New head coach, Kirk Thuggins as the starting quarterback, who will feed the tight end. Shout out TJ Hawkinson. I think that Kyle Pitts is in the premier position to succeed. I get they added in other targets to the offense like Darnell Mooney, right? And is that amazing for Pitts? Of course not on paper, but I still think that Kyle Pitts is going to be the 2nd biggest target on this team behind Drizzy, Drake, London. And as long as the Atlanta Falcons offense lives up to my expectations, I believe that Kyle Pitts is going to have that top 3, top 5 season, at the very least, a top 5 season that we have always wanted out of him. I think coming off the board as tight end 6, the reason why he's coming off the board as the tight end 6 and not the tight end 5 or the tight end 4 is because people are just tired of getting, you feel like a fucking puppet, right? A fist is going up your ass every time you draft Kyle Pitts. So I think this is finally the season where he breaks free from this narrative and has the huge year. There's going to be people that just say, never again, never drafting him again. But I really think he has the skill set to succeed with Kirk Cousins and a new head coach. 7th in contested catch rate last year, 4th in yards per reception, 14th in yards per target. He ranked 11th in targets, 16th in receptions, 11th in receiving yards, and 18th in total touchdowns. This is going to be the best year out of Kyle Pitts, and it's way easier to explain now. There's no Desmond Ridder. There's no Marcus Mariota. There are quarterbacks that actually can throw the fucking ball with Kirk Cousins under center. And if Kirk Cousins gets hurt, they drafted another quarterback super high for some obscene reason who can also throw the ball. So it won't even be as bad as Desmond Ridder or Marcus Mariota. So I love Kyle Pitts this year as the tight end 6. Again, I get some people might just have to plug their nose and jump on in because I want to be the conductor of the Kyle Pitts Express this season. You miss out on those early tight ends. Make sure you get Kyle Pitts before things get gross. And if you wait and you miss on Kyle Pitts and things do get really gross, there is one savior before it really starts to just be a bunch of guys with huge question marks. It's like when you're playing Gary's mod back in the day and you didn't have CS source, so you didn't have some textures in the game, and there's question marks everywhere, right? That is what the tight end position feels like after the top 8, 9 guys. But there is one savior, and his name is Jake Ferguson, tight end of the Dallas Cowboys, to close out today's video. Tight end of the Dallas Cowboys, which I already said. Aggregate ADP, tight end 11 at pick 87. Underdog Fantasy ADP, tight end 8 at pick 83.8. Underdog Fantasy is the sponsor of today's video. If you guys are new to Underdog Fantasy and click on the link in the video description, you'll receive a special pick plus up to $250 by clicking on the link in the video description or by using promo code Notorious if you are a first-time depositor. Underdog Fantasy is my favorite place to draft best ball drafts this summer. If you don't know what best ball is, it's the best part about fantasy football. It's the draft, and that's it. After your draft, you don't have to set your lineup. There's no waivers, no trades, no in-season management. At the end of every single week, Underdog will automatically put the highest scores into your lineup for you. Underdog Fantasy has the premier best ball tournament, $25 to enter. Best Ball Mania 5, first place, $1.5 million. They also are going to have tournaments with as low of buy-ins as $3 or $5. So make sure you guys check out Underdog Fantasy. Promo code Notorious if you're a first-time depositor. If you have a gambling problem, make sure that you call 1-800-GAMBLER. So Jake Ferguson, the reason why he feels like a savior late is because after Jake Ferguson, and even some guys going within a couple picks of Jake Ferguson feel like huge landmines that you can step on, right? Jake Ferguson feels both incredibly safe. He feels like wrapping that Trojan, wrapping that Durex around your squad, while also having the upside to blast off through the moon, straight to Mars, Pluto. Is Pluto even a planet anymore? I don't know. But straight to outer space, chilling with some aliens, right? And the reason behind that is because the Dallas Cowboys offense doesn't do anything in the offseason to bring around other competition. CeeDee Lamb, he's in some contract negotiation. He'll get his contract, so it's going to be CeeDee, Brandon Cooks, Jake Ferguson, Batman Zeke, and a bunch of fucking nobodies. So Jake Ferguson will be very involved yet again. He was the tight end 10 last year in PPR and the tight end 10 in PPR points per game. Coming off the board is the tight end 11. So at the very least, he finishes similar to his ADP as the tight end 10 or 11, with the upside to be a top 5 guy, because the Dallas Cowboys are a team that wants to throw the ball a bunch. The Dallas Cowboys are a team that is going to score a lot of points. Last season, 17 games played with 16 starts as his first year as the Dallas Cowboys starting tight end. 102 targets, 6 per game, 7th at tight end. 71 receptions, 4.2 per game, 9th. 761 receiving yards, 44.8 per game, 8th, and 5 total touchdowns, 7th. He ranked 6th in target accuracy for Mr. Dakota Prescott, 15th in yards per target, and 13th in yards per reception. Now, if the Dallas Cowboys had CeeDee, Brandon Cooks, and then they drafted some new, like they draft, say, Jermaine Burton, right? They draft Ricky Pearsall, they draft Xavier Legette or Keon Coleman, then I might start to panic and be like, you know what? Maybe I don't love Jake Ferguson as the tight end 11. But that is some Marvel movie, alternate reality, Doctor Strange bullshit. Because the reality we live in, it's Jake Ferguson, CeeDee Lamb, and Brandon Cooks. And I think that Jake Ferguson could easily out-target not CeeDee Lamb, but Brandon Cooks. I understand that Dak internally combusts like those people's ship that was looking to go look at the Titanic. But during the regular season, Dak Prescott is typically hotter than Sidney Sweeney, so I expect Jake Ferguson to be able to have, at the very least, a competent year, with the upside if he gets a little bit more touchdowns, maybe he busts off some bigger receptions, then Jake Ferguson has the upside to be that top 5 league winner tight ends. Thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below. Like it owes you some money. Hit it with the 1-2 Mayweather. Make sure you leave a like on today's video, whether you are new to the channel or not. Check out one of the videos on your screen if you haven't seen them already. I love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great rest of your guys' day, and we'll see you soon with another banger of a video. Love you guys. Stay safe. See you soon. Good boy.